I knew the exact moment everything crossed a line. 6:30 in the morning, coffee still hot in my hand, when I watched a white Lexus tear through my private ranch gate like it was a suggestion, not a boundary, and crush the healing garden my wife planted while she was fighting cancer. That was the third time in 1 week. And standing there in my kitchen, heart pounding, I made a quiet promise to myself. The next time she tried that, it would be the last. My name is Clayton Rivers, and this is one of those stories that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it. I'm not a dramatic guy by nature. I spent almost 3 decades in the Marines, mostly working on hydraulic systems on aircraft carriers. You learn fast in that world that noise doesn't solve problems. Precision does. After I retired, my wife Sarah and I bought a ranch in East Texas. 200 acres of rolling pasture, a creek, old oaks, quiet mornings. We bought it because Sarah was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and her doctors said stress was the enemy. This land was supposed to be her refuge. On her good days between chemo sessions, she'd sit on the wraparound porch with her oxygen tank humming softly beside her and watch monarch butterflies drift through the wildflower garden she planted herself. Blue bonnets, Indian paintbrush milkweed. She called it her sanctuary. I called it sacred ground. Our ranch sits just outside the city limits, surrounded by open land, and one very fancy subdivision called Meadowbrook Heights. 200 homes, all beige stucco red tile roofs, identical mailboxes, and an HOA that controlled everything down to the shade of green on your front door. And at the center of that HOA was Brenda Winchester. If you've ever dealt with one of those people, you already know the type. Early 50s, perfect hair, navy blazer, clipboard permanently attached to her hands. Drove a white Lexus SUV with inspirational bumper stickers that somehow made her personality worse. Brenda didn't just believe she was in charge of Meadowbrook Heights, she believed she was in charge of everything around it too. The first time I met her, I was out fixing fence posts when I heard an ATV engine cutting across my land. That alone set my teeth on edge. I followed the sound and found Brenda standing by my gate, high heels sinking into gravel, measuring it with a tape like she owned the place. I kept my voice calm. "Ma'am, this is private property. You need to use the public access road." She didn't even look up at first. When she did, the expression on her face said I was something she'd scraped off the bottom of her shoe. "I've been using this road for years," she said. "There's a historical right-of-way for our water infrastructure." That word historical, she said it like it was magic, like it erased fences, deeds, laws. Then she climbed back onto her ATV and roared off, leaving deep ruts in the gravel path Sarah had spent weeks carefully maintaining. I walked back to the house where Sarah was sitting on the porch, watching a butterfly cling to a honeysuckle vine. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice tired. "Nobody important," I said. That was a lie. I knew it the second it left my mouth. Over the next few weeks, Brenda escalated. The ATV turned into the Lexus. Every morning at almost the same time that SUV came barreling through my gate, past my house, straight through Sarah's garden, kicking up dust and gravel. My cattle learned to scatter at the sound of her engine. One of my Angus bulls panicked so badly he tore through a fence and gashed his leg on barbed wire. $800 in vet bills. Blood on my hands. Literally. Sarah stopped sitting outside. "I feel like we're living in a fishbowl," she said one night, tears in her eyes as she stared at the flattened flowers. That's when something in me started to crack. 3 weeks in, Brenda decided subtlety was overrated. Tuesdays became HOA inspection day. She brought the entire board through my gate like they were touring a national park. SUVs lined up. 12 people wandering around my land, leaving gates open, spooking livestock, taking pictures. I watched from the kitchen window as Brenda stood in the middle of Sarah's butterfly garden, designer boots crushing petals, explaining how this area would be perfect for a community gazebo. That was the moment I felt truly powerless. I'd handled combat zones. I'd handled drunk sailors and mechanical failures that could kill hundreds of people. But this was different. This was someone destroying my home slowly, legally adjacent, with a smile on her face. That night, lying next to Sarah, listening to her oxygen machine click and hum, my hands started shaking. I hadn't felt that since Afghanistan. I remember staring at the ceiling and thinking, maybe I should just sell. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe the stress wasn't worth it. And then I hated myself for even thinking that. Because this wasn't about pride. It was about protecting the one place where my wife could breathe literally and figuratively. So I stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking like a Marine again. Intelligence wins wars. I bought trail cameras, the kind hunters use, motion-activated infrared time-stamped. I installed them discreetly along the fence line and near the gate. Overlapping coverage, redundancy. Within days, the footage told a story Brenda never expected me to see. She wasn't just trespassing. She was charging people. I watched her collect cash from HOA residents who wanted what she advertised on Facebook as authentic Texas ranch tours. $50 a head, on my land, without permission. When she noticed the cameras, she smiled and waved at them. "Can't stop me," she called out. That smile lit something cold in my chest. I called a friend of mine from the Marines who'd gone to law school. He reviewed the footage and went quiet for a moment. "Clayton," he said, "this isn't just trespassing. This is commercial exploitation, and if her easement claim is fake..." That's when I went to the courthouse. I hired a professional surveyor. Military-grade GPS equipment accurate to within inches. I spent days in dusty record rooms pulling deeds, easements, plats, every document going back decades, and I found the truth. There was no legal right-of-way. None. The so-called historical easement had expired years ago. No renewal, no compensation, nothing. Worse, her HOA water line was illegally crossing not just my land, but 3 neighboring properties as well. When I showed the maps to my neighbors, their faces went pale. They had stories too. Threats, intimidation, paperwork pressure. Brenda had been doing this for years. The county hearing came next. Brenda arrived confident, portfolio in hand. I arrived with a banker's box full of evidence. When the planning director asked her to produce valid easement documentation, she stalled, stuttered, promised to consult her attorney. The hearing was postponed. That night, Sarah sat on the porch again for the first time in weeks. "We're winning," I told her. But Brenda wasn't done. She filed nuisance complaints, tried to freeze my finances, claimed my ranch was lowering property values. The stress landed Sarah in the hospital after a chemo session. I sat in a plastic chair beside her bed and made a decision. Enough. I dug deeper. And that's when the real bomb dropped. The original easement hadn't just expired, it had been replaced on paper with forged documents, fake signatures, fake notary seals, dated years before they existed. And then Brenda's husband contacted me. He slid a folder across a diner table and said, "What my wife's doing is criminal. I can't be part of it anymore." That folder was everything. At that point, the power dynamic flipped. Brenda wasn't a tyrant anymore. She was a criminal hoping no one would notice. So I set the trap legally. I installed steel bollards at my gate, hydraulically operated, retractable, fully permitted, warning signs posted, cameras rolling. I sent Brenda a certified letter, use public roads only, private property secured. She signed for it. Then she lost her mind. She rallied the HOA, claimed I was threatening their water, live-streamed rants, promised a convoy, said they'd drive through anyway. Monday morning, 15 vehicles lined up behind her Lexus, phones out, engines revving. Sarah sat beside me on the porch in her wheelchair. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready my whole life." Brenda floored it. The sensors triggered, the hydraulics engaged. Steel rose from the ground in half a second. The Lexus didn't stand a chance. Metal screamed, fluids poured. The vehicle died between the bollards like it had been impaled by consequence itself. Federal agents stepped in. Handcuffs clicked. Live stream comments exploded. Brenda screamed about rights while being arrested for fraud, trespassing, conspiracy. I didn't cheer. I just watched Sarah breathe easier than she had in months. Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs boundaries. And the lesson is simple: documentation beats intimidation every single time.